Maybe it's because of low inventory. So I asked Ben and Stacy to get me some numbers. Here's how many closings there were in your market. So in the last 90 days, there were 2,370 closings. How many did you make? Did you get your share of those? And if you didn't, what I would like to ask is, are you willing to show up like you mean it? Show up on purpose versus on accident. Because what I'm near certain that most are falling short in, myself included, is the Ninja 9. That's the recipe. The 5 daily habits that shouldn't take you more than 15 to 30 minutes a day, and the 4 weekly habits that shouldn't take you more than an hour or two. So habit number 1, how are you starting your days? Are you starting them with gratitudes and affirmations? Mindset couldn't be more important right now with the shift in the market. Look at your life list, read something positive, listen to something positive, get your head in the game. Habit number 2, show up like you mean it, on purpose. Instead of waking up to your phone and looking at your email and your social media and everything else, get on your agenda first thing in the morning and time block your days. Schedule everything you have to do every single day so that you stay on your agenda and not on the agenda of somebody else. Number 3, write 2 handwritten personal notes daily. Terry, I don't know who to write note cards to. Please. Get on social media and see who's got something going on in their world. That's who you might write a note card to. Maybe they got a new puppy. Maybe the kids just started their last year of school. Maybe their child started pre-K. Love on them. Success habit number 4. Focus on your hot list daily. These are the people that are probably going to go under contract and close within the next 30 to 60 days. They know they want to buy or sell. They want to buy or sell through you. Ask yourself this every day. I wonder who's going to go under contract this week. And if they're not going to go under contract, I wonder how I might serve them anyway. What can I do to get them to the next step? What can I do for them? How can I serve them? Do you remember this saying, what we focus on expands? What I think about the most, I get more of. What are you dwelling on? Are you listening to all the chatter, to the news, to all the scared realtors around you that don't know what they're going to do? Some of us have been in the business for decades, and we've made it through lots and lots and lots of markets. You will too. Success habit number 5. Focus on your warm list daily. People that want to buy or sell, but they may not know they want to buy or sell. But you know they're going to buy or sell. And they want to do it sometime in the next year, maybe. Okay? So watch for pain or pleasure. Monitor what's going on. Monitor what they're saying about their job, about their family, about their recreation, about their dreams, and be listening. And then put them on your warm list and stay in the flow with them. Now let's move to the weekly habits. Client service calls, right? Are you talking to all your sellers, all your buyers, every single week, your most recent closings? Make sure you talk to all your people every week. Because what we know, according to Harris Interactive, is that every American household knows at least 4 people that are moving every year. And my next transaction is embedded in this transaction. So if I'm on the phone with my people, I'm doing life with my people, I'm golfing, I'm going to church with, I'm doing whatever I do, and I'm speaking in terms of Ford, family, occupation, recreation, and dreams, and I'm listening for anything that's going on in their life, they might be going to meet a realtor in the next 12 months. Habit number 7, the number 1 habit to new listings in this market. Why we have to shout this from the rooftops to agents, I'm not really sure, but live real estate reviews. Like, knock on the door, like pick up the phone and, hey Josh, it's Terry Johnson, I just finished preparing a real estate review and I wondered if I could pop it by one afternoon this week, I'll just be there a moment, right? And you stop by and you hand it to them and you ask about the kids or the puppy or school or whatever's going on. 2 live real estate reviews weekly. If you don't get them live real estate reviews, guess what? They'll go to Zillow and figure out for themselves what their house is worth. Success habit number 8. Talk to 50 people a week. For heaven's sakes, friends, we are in the people business. We've got to make sure that we are their source of everything real estate. But when you're talking to them, ask forward questions. Talk to them about them. Forward is free. Not much excuse for us not loving on our people. If we expect to get business from them, we've got to be their source. And habit number 9, update your database weekly. Everything you find out about anybody, what's going on in their life, any pain, any pleasure, any follow-up, update your database on a weekly basis. Put it in there, put your follow-up in there so you know what to do the next time you talk to them. It won't be long when you get in the habit of your Ninja 9 until your calendar will drive your contacts, because you know birthdays and anniversaries and closing anniversaries and so on, right? And so you're constantly loving on, following up on, texting, writing personal notes, dropping by the house, taking a meal, doing a real estate review. It's not that hard, you guys. This is a real job, and you're the CEO of a multi-million-dollar corporation. It's time we start showing up if we want to see the results that we say we want to see by the end of the year. It's not too late. We've got over 120 days to do so. My challenge to you is starting right now. Put it on your calendar and show up. This is Terry Johnson with your friendly reminder that TSW, this system works if you'll work the system. Until next time.
Good morning. Nothing like a little kick in the pants from Terry to open us up, huh? She's always so motivating. I think we have a pretty good informative program for you today, and to kick us off, I'm going to have Ellen from Old Republic Home Protection come up and share a few words.
Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all again. You know, I'm so thrilled to be here because I have just been in a relationship with PMZ for the 30 years that I've been your senior account executive for Old Republic Home Protection in the Central Valley. And I consider you to be family. I really do. And this is just very heartwarming for me. And I also wanted to say that, you know, most of you have heard me tell you that I am your ace in the hole. Does anybody remember what ACE stands for? I did want to share a couple of things that are new with Old Republic. First of all, we have a new coverage, and really very briefly, I just wanted to say, make sure that you look at our policy, make sure that you go on our website and take a look at it, or actually register for the toolbox if you haven't already done that. It takes like 30 seconds. But broken pipes outside the home, whether they're sewer lines, water lines, gas lines, hose bibs, emergency shutoff valves, all of that's covered now under the Platinum. Also $1,000 more towards code upgrades, structural modifications for the house is covered under Platinum. And right now, if you don't know about the new air conditioning law that has hit California in January, if you don't know about that now, you will, because when we are replacing air conditioning units, any technician is replacing air conditioning units, they have to upgrade it to a 15 SEER, and that's the seasonal energy efficiency ratio of the air conditioner. More expensive, we pay for that. Labor's higher, of course, we pay for that. All the Freon, the Puron, all of that, the recaps, we pay for everything. But it depends on what kind of coverage, on whether or not the homeowner has to come out of pocket. So make sure you get that Platinum. Another thing that's, and one other thing I wanted to mention too, and then the options, if you sell a house that has upscale appliances, like Bosch or Thermador, that kind of thing, it's $100 more for an option that will take the limit of each appliance from $5,000 to $10,000. So you pay $100, and now you get $10,000 per appliance. That's pretty crazy, but that's a new option. Something else that's new is we have a new president. So our new president that came in last year, amazing guy, he has also brought in new technology. Our website looks different. I have learned new tricks. We've got new software. It's just things are working so much more efficiently. And the other thing he did is open a brand new second call center. And I wanted to mention this because our second call center is, let me just say that all the other large home warranty companies that have a second call center, they are outsourced to another country. Ours is not calling to India or to the Philippines. You will get somebody with a really cool accent, but that's because they are in Charlotte, North Carolina. So it's a cool southern drawl. But we're either San Ramon or Charlotte, North Carolina, and I just wanted to mention that because I think that's huge. So we are just making, leaps and bounds and doing super well. And Old Republic and all of that's due to you. So did want to say thank you very much, and I really do mean that seriously about always call Ellen. My contact information, right on cue, my contact information, if you don't have me in your phone, please text me right now with your name. Most of you do have me, but please text me with your name so I can then save you in my phone, and I'll know it's you when you call, so I will answer when you always call Ellen. And so I'm serious about that, but what I'm not serious about is how I got my black eye. It was a tree trimming, at the pole that you go way out and you get the top of the tree, you pull back with the rope, and I have decided that that was not a good idea. So anyway, thank you very much. I love you all, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ellen. So that's a challenging market, right? So we came up with a summer challenge. Many of you embraced it, many of you didn't. That's okay. But one thing I did hear from those of you that did embrace it was it kept you on task. You did more open houses, you did more real estate reviews, and more importantly, you stayed in touch with your database. And I want to recognize the winners of that here. The third place winners, you can just do a courtesy wave like this. Third place, $100 PMT credit was Michelle Ricklick from Turlock, Ison Harrison from Stockton, Jeannie McDonald from Modesto Orangeburg, Melissa Gregory from Oakdale, Tara Wagner from Ripon, and Sun Hart from Modesto Carpenter Office. Those are our $100 credit winners. Our second place award winners had their quarterly MLS dues paid. Katrina Souza from Los Banos, Reem Al-Hindi from Stockton, Victor Skort from Modesto Orangeburg, I saw the cursive wave, I like that picture. Nate Bartling from Oakdale, Ellis Archurda from Manteca, Kelly Devine from Lodi, and Tara Cardoza from Modesto Carpenter. The first place winners have to come on stage, so sorry. You're gonna love this. And Mike's got a little something for you. Our first place winners won $250 cash, and our first winner was from Turlock, Michael Elizondo. From Stockton, Charlie Lewis, who's out of town. Jamie McDonald from Modesto Orangeburg. Karen Serpa from Oakdale. Leslie Rice from Manteca. Kim Thomas from Lodi, and Darla Diaz from Carpenter.
Yeah.
So we're going to do a picture. Alonzo, did I tell you that?
I'm
Can you come do a picture? Come up here in the front, Mike, and take a picture with them right up here in front. Yeah, so where's Alondra? So
Over here. I'm ready.
She has a Zoom.
Look up here.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Smiling, I'm right here.
Don't be pointing.
Click.
One more. Okay, we're good.
Congratulations, everyone. We also had a grand prize winner. This person won $500 cash, had the most total points. Jackie Tidmarsh from Orangeburg. Yeah, along with that.
I'm ready.
Congratulations, Jackie. And that's all of our award winners. I love it. And before we turn it over here, next Wednesday, do we have a slide for that? Next Wednesday, we have Mastering Lead Engagement and Conversion. It's the training we're doing in Modesto and in Stockton. Some of you have this dialed in. You know, how to talk to someone, a floor call, how to talk to a Zillow lead, how to talk to somebody at an open house. And, you know, others, we need more practice at it. And Randy and Daniel have it mastered, and they're going to do a class on this. And, you know, one of my favorite Zig Ziglar quotes that you've heard me say is, what we learn after we think we know it all that counts. So I would encourage you to come to this. It's 9:30 to 11 in Modesto and 12:30 to 2 in Stockton. And come check them out. It'll be a great training. We're going to start doing something every 2 months, most likely. In November, I think we're going to do a goal-setting one. So I want to appreciate Daniel and Randy for donating their time for this. We have a special guest to kind of give a state of the market. I don't know if you've heard of Johnny Cash, but Johnny Cash is here. Please welcome Mike Zigaris, everyone.
Great to be with all of you this morning. Very much appreciate you taking the time to be here today. I think it's a valuable experience every time we've done this. Appreciate your coming. I just want to spend a few minutes talking a little bit about the market circumstances today and certainly answer questions that you might have regarding it. Every real estate market has its own personality. They're all different than any prior market. They all have their own little personality. This is particularly odd personality. This is a market that we've never seen before, and I want to talk a little bit about why we're in this market, where we're at in this market, and what I think we're heading towards. Why we're in this market is the result of government actions prior to the pandemic and during the pandemic. The federal government took action to dramatically lower interest rates to protect the economy during this past several years. What did that result in? That resulted in the lowest interest rates in any of our lifetimes. And when I was up here in prior events, I was telling everybody, get your clients into 3% mortgage, right? You had clients like, oh, I don't know if I want to spend the money on the house, and they're sitting there with the opportunity to get a 3% loan. And it turns out that we did a really good job, and zillions of people are at 3% loans. Second, the government printed trillions of dollars and dropped that money out of helicopters into people's laps all over the country. Okay? And third, and that's all called monetary policy. That's all done by the Federal Reserve. On the other side, fiscal policy, what the Congress did was the Congress said, oh my goodness, we have all these problems, we have this pandemic, we're gonna commit to spending hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars to stimulate the economy. Well, what all this ended up happening was creating inflation. If you basically print trillions of dollars and drop it into the economy, the price of everything goes up because you have about the same amount of goods and services being chased by a lot more money. So that created inflation. So the government itself created inflation. When it became apparent that inflation was a real serious problem, and we needed to do something about it, the Federal Reserve started raising interest rates dramatically. They did it from a floor that was so low that their intent in raising interest rates is specifically to reduce demand. In other words, if it's more expensive to borrow money, fewer people will borrow money, the economy will slow down, the housing market will slow down, the automobile market will slow down. All these things will happen because the Federal Reserve has the ability to raise the cost of borrowing for all of us in this room and for businesses throughout the country. However, although they succeeded in raising interest rates dramatically and reducing demand, so many of our clients now cannot afford a loan. Many still can, but many cannot. So in a way, they succeeded in reducing demand, which was what they wanted to do to slow things down. What they didn't think about, by the way, when I say they, I just want to point something out here. There are 400 PhDs working in the Federal Reserve. 400. None of them go to bed at night worried about losing their job or losing their income because they raise interest rates. People in interest rate sensitive industries like real estate and automobiles and other industries that are interest rate sensitive, they're concerned about it, but these guys aren't. But anyway, so they raise interest rates dramatically and they reduce demand, which is specifically what they wanted to do. But what they did not realize is at the same time, they were affecting supply as well. That is, the number of homes that would be on the market. Why did they affect supply? Because they trapped millions and millions of Americans in their homes that had 3% loan. When I say 3%, it could be 2.5%, 3.5%, whatever, but in low interest rate loans, trapped them in their homes. So now we have a situation where we have, really under the hood, if you will, we still have demand and we have a significantly reduced supply. So the challenge we have today isn't so much selling homes, the challenge we have today is finding homes to sell. That's where we're at. And to complicate matters, because the Congress, in its infinite wisdom, decided to spend hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars on infrastructure projects and other expenditures, what that has done is it's continued to heat up the economy at a time when the monetary people at the Federal Reserve want to slow the economy down. So because they're spending money which continues to support and heat up the economy. So that's where we find ourselves, is in this trap that's been created by government actions, not intentionally to dry up supply. In fact, that was an unintended consequence of what the government was trying to accomplish. That's kind of what's happened and what brought us to this point. Okay, I'm here today, I'm going to basically speculate, and I apologize to everyone in advance because this is my own personal opinion. We are at this very moment at a tipping point. I'm not saying the Federal Reserve won't raise interest rates 1 or 2 more times, but I really believe we're at a tipping point. The economy is beginning to slow down. I want to say to each of you, because we're in the residential real estate brokerage world, the best thing that could happen to us as professionals is for the economy to slow down. If you hear that we're entering a recession or there's going to be a soft landing or anything like that, that's music to my ears. Because when the economy starts to slow down, then the interest rates will start to back off and we'll be in a little bit better situation. By the way, and, particularly for the younger people here, the interest rate environment we were in at 3% loans, that's abnormal. 7% is not abnormal. 3% is abnormal. I bought my first home in 1973 for 7 1/4, about the same rates as we have today, 1973. The 3% loan world is abnormal. If you have clients expecting the world to return to that place, it's not going to happen in our lifetimes. We will, however, I think if we see a softening in the economy, we're going to see 10-year rates on treasury bills, which that is the instrument that most closely aligns itself with the home loan world. 10-year interest rates start to subside a little. My hope is that we can see 5.5% to 6% interest rates by next year. And we're going to be living with that. Okay, so we're still going to be in a world where people are in 3.5% loans in their homes, and there's a 5.5% or 6% market. But at a 5.5% and 6% market, we'll be in a lot better shape than we are today. In the meantime, this is a great time for everybody here to embrace the profession in ways that Terry talked about. Okay, and I personally would walk over hot coals to go to the seminar that we're having, Randy and Daniel are doing, because these guys know what they're doing, and you want to learn from one another. This is the time to invest in yourself, to invest in the tools, understand the tools that we provide and offer, to maintain a positive mental attitude in this market. And Terry talked about when you wake up in the morning, focus on things that are positive in nature. I will tell you, and I've said this on this stage many times, mental states are contagious. Hang around positive people. You hang around negative people, you can't avoid but to absorb their negativity. There is business to be had today. You need to go out and engage with people, drop in, visit your clients, that bought homes from you in the past. Just be actively involved in engaging with the community that you're in, the community of clients that you have, and I think a lot of good things can come your way. I'm extremely proud of our team here at PMZ. We have a great team of sales professionals, a terrific team of managers, leaders, and we have a great opportunity to continue to provide the leadership that we have in the past and that we, hopefully will continue to provide in the future. I feel blessed to be able to work with each and every one of you. I feel like we're at a turning point as we speak today. Data that came out yesterday, to me, shows that we're at a tipping point where the labor market's beginning to soften, the inflation rate's beginning to soften to a point where it's becoming less frightening, and I think we're at that tipping point. But, I would suggest to you that most real estate professionals in America are not fully embracing the opportunities that exist at this moment. They're running away from, hiding from the market. This is a challenging market. Every market has its own personality. Going into a new market, it will have its own personality. In the 46 years plus that I've been involved as a real estate broker, this is one of the two most extreme markets that I have personally experienced. The other one in 1981, when the prime rate was over 20%, mortgages were 18.5%. And this market. Very different markets. And, then I said this too will pass, and this market will pass. I believe it's beginning to pass as I speak. I believe that the sun is going to shine a little bit more every day over the next 6 to 9 months. And I believe that we all have an opportunity to do really, really well in this market and the one that we will be entering. I want to thank you all for being here today. Very much appreciate it. We'll head on to other parts of our program. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, we kind of have a little opening act for Gov. We have Dave Howell here. He's the CEO of Metrolist. So Dave, you want to come on up as I go through your little bio here. Dave has more than 30 years experience working in Metrolist service industry. He's the president and CEO of Metrolist & Corp, the largest MLS in Northern California with more than 23,500 subscribers in 17 counties. Dave has become one of the foremost experts in MLS rules and policies, MLS operations, and building lasting relationships between MLSs and brokers and agents. Dave served as the 2021 chairman of the board of the National Council of Multiple Listing Services. He has been part of Metrolist team that has helped shape local and state and national MLS policies. Please welcome Dave.
All right, before we do this, Ben and I are going to take a picture. Come here, Ben. All right, so everybody wave. All right. On three, 1, 2, 3. There you go. Thanks, Ben. I know how shy Ben can be sometimes, so I wanted to take advantage of that opportunity. I also wanted to, first and foremost, thank the Zagaris family, Mike and John. You guys have been very good friends for many, many years. Good to see Stephen, and Ben does a fantastic job representing the organization. I've seen him out on the road as well. And this is a real stand-up organization you should be very proud of. When I think of PMZ, I think of a family, and lots of family members, lots of you are my friends, and I've known for a very long, long time. So, without further ado, I think that Ben was couching this as being a very informative session. I have a few moments to share with you, probably about 20 minutes, and then we'll ask for some questions, and then Gov will get up here. Always nice to follow our precinct Gov. But with that, we had some statistics that came out this week. Actually, there was an issue with a little cyber attack on Rapatoni Corporation. Some of you may have heard about it, but many of you were unaffected by it. And I will just preface that by saying that, number one, ransomware cost the world $20 billion in 2021. That's expected to rise to $265 billion by 2031. 37% of all businesses and organizations were hit by ransomware. Recovering from a ransomware attack cost businesses $1.85 million on an average in 2021. And out of all ransom victims, 32% pay the ransom, but only 65% get their data back. Only 57% of the businesses are successful in recovering their data using a backup. Today there was a little bit of good news that a multinational task force took down a company called QuackBot. You'll probably hear about this. That network was netting somewhere in the neighborhood in the last 18 months, $58 million worth of extortion. So the MetroList is a tech company. We work with a very successful business partner known as Rapatoni Corporation. They do two primary businesses. One is the accounting and membership systems, and the other is MLS. Most of you will realize the MLS, the Prospector Plus system. MetroList is the only MLS of all the 40 MLSs that they have nationwide that hosts our own system in a data center in Sacramento. So what happened was, when they were attacked, it's basically a denial of access, a cyber attack. What it does is it locks down or encrypts the system and makes access to it impossible. And then that's when the ransoms come in, and you pay a ransom, they give you the keys, and sometimes the keys work and sometimes they don't. Because our data was in a data center in Sacramento, Rapatoni called us and let us know that they had been attacked. We pulled up the drawbridges, and our system was isolated. We were the only MLS system in the entire country running the Rapatoni software that was unaffected. There were some quirks. The dashboard had to be turned off because some of the links that linked to things like the Cloud CMA and one of the statistics programs did not work, so that is currently offline, but your ability to search and list and sell real estate continued. So we're very proud of that. Another proud moment was that, if you guys recall, a couple years ago, we were cyber attacked at MetroList. Our system was down for 2 days. This last attack took down every MLS running Rapatoni, and there was 38 of them in the country, for 16 days. You can imagine not having access. There's jokes about the book coming back, because I know a lot of you weren't even born when the book was out, but aside from that, 16 days is a long time without data. MetroList provisioned our system because we participated in a system called RE California with Barry's in San Francisco, and MetroList. Our data is fully synchronized. So all of the Barry's in San Francisco data resided on the MetroList servers that were not affected. So about 3 days into it, we kept telling them, hey, we can turn your guys, your agents on, you can search our system. No, we've got it under control. Other MLSs don't have a whole lot of, we're competitors, but the trust is always the fun part. And finally, 3 days in, Barry's accepted our offer. And to date, over 2,100 of their members accessed and were able to stay in business because of that. So Metro is very happy to be able to provide that level of support to them. Just within the office, I will just tell you guys, just be careful on links. They are phishing like crazy. Anything that doesn't look straight up, do not click on it. Check with your IT people. They're also starting to send SMS text messages and going that way. You know, friends will get a message from you saying, hey, go buy like 20 Apple cards, you know, and bring them to the office or bring them here as quickly as possible. So be very, very careful about that. So that was a little bit of a digression there, but I did want to throw that out to you. I do have a presentation for you today, 3 points. We're going to be talking about upcoming revisions to the MLS rules. These are, in some cases, in response to legal things that are happening nationally and then also regionally within the NorCal Alliance, which is made up of the 7 MLSs in Northern California that you have access to their data through for Barrie, San Francisco Metro List, Bay East, Contra Costa Bridge, and MLS listings. In addition to that, we're going to be introducing Symbian. There's a lot of emphasis on ADUs in the state, and there's a new program that's available to you today on Prospector within the listing detail. I'll talk about that in a moment. And then in addition to the MetroList staff, I became CEO in February of this year. Having a blast, by the way. This is a lot of fun. But my duties have changed a little bit. I have different responsibilities. And as much as I'd like to be out on the road doing what I do, I can't do that, and I can't be away from the office as much. It's a transition in my life. It's a tremendous honor to be that, but we had to actually build our bench up a little bit, and I'll be introducing that individual here in a second. Not here, but I have a good slide with this high school picture. All right, so summary highlights. We have the CAR, NAR rules comparison. I'm going to talk about that first. We have a new disclaimer in the MLS rules. We have some new statuses. We've added a coming soon and a off MLS sales status that will be coming to you very shortly. I'll give you a timeline on that. So for starters, the CAR, next slide please. The CAR rules, when we do changes to the rules, you'll see something like this. It's a summary of MLS rules changes. They don't happen all that often. We like the MLS rule booklet. It's a really, really thin thing. We don't chase the market with rules. We caution the MLS committee about making up rules that we can't enforce, you know, things like that. So we try to be really smart about the rules. And the nice thing is it's withstood the test of time. And I would just stop right here and just say my money's on Mike and his predictions. I think those are very, very accurate and very well done assessment of where the market is. I'm hearing that consistently across the country, and I do get around with other MLSs in the country. But with this summary of MLS rules changes, don't be intimidated or worry about all the red that's here. Normally the summary rules change pages are 1 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. This one's going to be about 4 pages long. The reason for that is that it had been a long, long time since we had done a comparison or a scrub of the MetroList rules that we had implemented over the last 30 years and compared those to the CAR model MLS rules. Okay, so there's 2 different rule sets. Because of MetroList organizational structure, where we're 50% owned by the brokers and 50% owned by the associations, we don't have to adopt all the mandated rules that spin out of NAR and also the California State Association of Realtors. Most of the changes that will be in this next revision really do not substantively change the essence of the rules at all. It's just either strengthening the language or trying to get that language more consistent with the CAR rules. The reason that's important is we now do, or we are in a cooperative with 6 other MLSs in the NorCal Alliance, some of which are wholly owned by associations, and they have to follow those mandates. So we have worked very diligently with those other 6 MLSs to ensure that our rules are not so off where it makes sense so that you get into trouble or hot water if you're cross-listing or doing business in any of these other markets. Next slide, please. Okay, so the new disclaimer, this is 1215.2. You might want to read that while I'm talking. The essence of this, you guys heard of ChatGPT, okay? You've heard of artificial intelligence. Our old disclaimer prior to this said that pretty much in verbatim that all the information provided herein has been provided by the seller, has not been verified by the buyer, the agent, the broker, the association, or the MLS, right? So it's all been provided by the seller. They sign that when you're supposed to use the listing form or something that gets them to acknowledge that they provided all the information. Well, guess what? That worked fine until the onset of AI. And with AI, what you're seeing is different levels of prompts that create content. That content then can actually wind up in your listing. The first generation AI stuff that you saw were through companies like Box Brownie, where you had virtual staging, so there's representations of furniture and such. And then the big concern there was it proportionate? The second level that you saw, so that was interior pictures. Then you saw exterior. And we see it all here at MetroList. We've actually seen land with, the modular stuck on there, and it looks like it's there, but it's not there. You got to understand that typically with photos, in the rule in base at MetroList is what's in the picture is what's being sold. So there's this visual representation that you have to be aware of. In many cases, those visual representations have not been provided by who? The seller. Okay, they've been provided by you, an agent, or some third party. Now we go to ChatGPT. ChatGPT is awesome. I think you guys should be investigating that. It stops short of, I know some people have programmed ChatGPT to know all about themselves. They're reading stories to their children. They're, adding messages about being nice to your brother in those stories. Those AI-generated things. It does a very good thing with writing. And one of the things I know about real estate agents is you're very social butterflies. You can talk the ears off of elephants, and not everybody's a good writer, right? So you focus on your comments, you do the best you can. Hey, what the heck? You throw it out at ChatGPT, and it comes back, and it looks a lot better. That is a common experience with people utilizing that tool. It's not going away, but I would caution you this. One is that it's all about the prompt, and it's all about proofing the output. If you do not have the ability to proof the output to 100% satisfaction that that's the truth, do not attach it to your listing. Don't put it out as your own. It lies, it gets information, it makes up garbage all the time. Just do it on a house that hasn't sold in 15 years and say, hey, tell me about this house. It'll make a great, story about that particular house, much of which is fabricated. So be very, very careful. Now, the issue with the disclaimer is, and one of the things that we recognize at MetroList, there's no program out there that 100% of the time will scrub this stuff. And so with that said, there's no spell check. The universities are probably rolling out something to try to make papers but ultimately that disclaimer is about as far as we can go right now, which basically says that this listing may include information that is artificially prepared. Next slide, please. All right, coming soon. This is a big deal. Coming soon status, part of the backstory on this is that the 6 MLSs to our west of Modesto here, all have variations of coming soon. Not one of them is the same. They're all different. Okay, some of them call them member-only listings. Others call them straight up coming soon. Now, in the Alliance, we synchronize our data. So data input into any of those systems that winds up in this greater Modesto area, in their systems, is transported over and it is commingled or cross-pollinated with our data here. Because we don't have a placeholder for coming soon, those listings are not ingested. So imagine we have a rule where listings are entered in the 6 other MLSs, but they can't get here. There's listings in the Modesto, Tracy, Sacramento, Grass Valley, Galt area, wherever, that you can't see, but their members can. So there's listings in their system for all these areas in our marketplace that you all cannot see. We just talked about limited inventory. Why would that happen? The other side of that is that there's a lot of inventory within our boundaries that is falling into these coming soon categories that are perceived as agents hiding them. Well, CAR statistics show that that is not generally the case. The reason agents are using coming soon is to pre-market the property, get it ready, carpet, paint, bark, all those types of things, where we used to try to rely on the future on market date. We put that future on market date in here, which suppress the days on market counted from counting. The CAR statistics that they ran said that anybody that puts a listing in statewide, anybody that puts a listing in, on average, in 9 to 11 days, goes and rolls it into the active status. When that happens, then ultimately the listing lights up, everybody's happy, the seller wants you to do certain things, and ultimately that's provisioned at this point. So we believe that there's a certain cadre of people. You can't just bundle all the coming soons into the people that are hiding, or the agents that are hiding it from you. That is a very, very small percentage, but that's how coming soon's been painted with the big black brush of this is a bad thing because they're not being pro-consumer or pro-competitive. They're trying to double end the deal. So anyway, that's coming soon. Coming soon status, by the way, it takes a little while to implement. You probably won't see it for about 60 days. So to add a status to the prospector system takes a little while. Next slide. I heard a question. Yes, sir.
So on the coming soon status, does that show up for our clients as well? So if we have them set up on an
Good question. I got the answer.
Okay.
All right. Prompt and answer, prompt and response, right? So here's your AI. Not really, but the listing, when you enter it into the system with coming soon, and I was hoping you'll be able to read all about it, is exposed to participants and subscribers only when it's entered into the system. If you have an auto prospect set up for a client, you can send them to clients through the auto prospecting feature. So on a one-off, you can send them, but in general, they're not going to syndicate. So that means they're not going out on Zillow, Realtor, all that type of stuff. There's no outbound beyond participants and subscribers unless you send them individually through auto prospecting. I'll answer more questions. Let me chew through, keep the questions. My presentation isn't that long, but if I get into questions, I won't be able to cover all the information for you. But that is a very good question. And the other question we get on this, will the days on market be suppressed? And the answer is yes, until the listing is changed to the active status. When it goes to the active status, the days on market clicker continues to click. All right, sold off MLS status. So a lot of good comps out there, but the issue may be it might have been a for sale by owner. It could have been a subdivision who didn't want to enter it into the MLS. It's any transaction that you all would participate in that you would like to, in some cases, get credit for Masters Club, that type of thing. And you can enter that into the multiple listing service, and you will be able to. There is a requirement that you have a permission to post form. So, your corporate attorney, is it Jim? Jim? Is Jim here? Okay. Well, Jim will have some sort of message to tell you all in the future about the permission to post capabilities within this. So if you have inventory that, it maybe had it on a waiver and it's sold outside the MLS, we're saying you can't put it in there. Ultimately, that's going to change. And then we're going to have a grace period of probably going back about 6 months where you can backfill all that information in, go back and put that information into the system and be on your way. Okay, next slide, please. All right, your free one-stop ADU. This is a program called Symbian. It's a property information portal. They work with the city and local governments. It works very well within, the closer you are to a big City, it works better. It does have spotty coverage when you get up into the snow line kind of areas, but generally pretty good, and generally they work with most municipalities. You'll be able to, what you do is you bring up your listing, or any listing, as a fact, on Prospector, and on the listing detail page where you got the super links and all those different little links, we'll show you that in a second, there is a link for Symbian, and you can pull up free ADU reports, which includes information about the property, key regulations, and the steps to getting your ADU design approved and built. Next slide, please. So here's a representation of a search. California laws allows detached ADUs here. The state does one level of law allowing these types of things. You have to check with the local city ordinances, because in some cases that's not a straight pass-through with all of those. But what it does is it gives you a nice little tool where you can position the ADU, any possible structure, and then that would be conceptually in accordance with the local statutes of being able to do that on that particular property. Next slide, please. See listings on, check for ADU feasibility, includes free reports. You're going to look for that button. Next slide, please. Back one slide. Okay, sorry, I took out a slide. I actually had the Prospector representation there for you to take a look at. We did, okay, next slide. All right, now this guy, I just hired this guy. I talked to John a little bit about him. John knows him pretty well. John is on the California Real Estate Brokers, Inc. Board of Directors. He's also on the MetroList Board of Directors. CREB, California Real Estate Brokers, Inc., is the broker shareholder of MetroList. They own half of MetroList. So every brokerage that's out there, the primary participant from each firm is automatically a member in that, and John's is on the board of directors by virtue of that. John Hughes works, he's a broker out of Placer County. He's a former Placer County Board of Realtors president, Realtor of the Year, emeritus man. He's got every class award you can actually imagine. He's super big in involvement with respect to CAR Pro Standards. Knows all about the law with respect to real estate. I'm sure he doesn't miss the Gov presentations, but there's a lot more information out there to pay attention to. And John is the current seated chair of the California Real Estate Brokers, Inc. organization, so he's the CREB chair. About a year ago, I started talking to John way before I had authorization to hire him. It was kind of what if, because I knew the board wanted MetroList to build up our presence with respect to people being out here in front of you and answering questions for you. I would certainly hope that you would welcome John when you see him at one of your family gatherings such as this. It'd be very, very nice of you to do that. But John is coming online as the Vice President of Industry Relations. A big initiative of MetroList, one of our stated #1 missions is growth. And growth is client retention, keeping the clients you have, and building up more clientele. And we're actively doing that in your neighborhood. So a lot of activity currently up in the Tuolumne Calaveras area. Any of your friends ask you about how MetroList is, and we hope you to be honest and tell them it's a great service. Hey guys, on behalf of MetroList, myself, I have 30 plus years in the business. I very much thank you for the opportunity to present today, Mike and John and Ben. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Dave. That was great. And we are on to our main act as he works his way down the aisle. Gov Hutchinson is Assistant General Counsel of the California Association of Realtors. Gov has been with CER since 1985 and manages CER's Member Legal Services Program in Los Angeles. Gov advises realtors through the hotline on all aspects of real estate, and he trains and supervises other hotline attorneys. Gov received his bachelor's degree in history from Princeton University and his doctorate from University of Pennsylvania. He has written the California Real Estate Magazine, co-authored CAR Continuing Education course, and is the master instructor for the Education Division of CAR with certification from the California Bureau of Real Estate. He also regularly speaks to associations, boards of realtors, affiliated trade associations, city, county, bar associations, and major real estate firms, including his favorite, PMZ Real Estate. Gov has credited his rise to stardom to his many trips to the State Theater to visit us. So we really appreciate Gov being here once again. Please welcome Gov Hutchinson.
Thank you. Everything he said is true. You know, I do love coming here. It's the only time all year I'm in show business, I'm on stage. You know, my name is Gov Hutchinson, right? Unusual name. So I'm used to people thinking that I'm the governor of California. To this day, realtors come up to me and say, "You're doing a great job as governor of California." But the latest thing is, you know, one of the candidates for president is a guy named Asa Hutchinson. He used to be the governor of Arkansas. Realtors think I'm running for president, I swear to God. Sorry, I'm not. There are a couple of realtors that have actually asked me that. No, I'm just Gov, your attorney, that's all I am. Attorney at CAR, I'm in charge of the hotline. Remember, if you have any questions, call the hotline. And I like to do what I'm doing today, which is sort of just to update you on the latest. There's always changes, you know this, you learn everything you need to know to do real estate, and then everything changes. So it's not enough to learn it all, you gotta keep up with it. So that's sort of my job when I do this. And I would say compared to some years, it's not as bad as some years, but there's always changes, and there's always things you need to know. Okay, I'm gonna talk first about a couple of big picture things, then I'll get into some specifics about some new laws and some new forms. Big picture stuff, I know you guys don't do property management, right? You guys don't do property management. But it's inevitable when you have clients, they have tenants and they start asking you questions. You got to be very careful about being accidentally giving them property management advice, right? Because, I mean, the world has changed dramatically since the pandemic. There's so many new rules now with rentals that it's impossible for you to keep up with them. It's hard for me to keep up with them, and you can't be the expert for your clients. For example, it used to be a simple question. You know, I want to increase the rent. How do I do that? Do you know how much you can increase someone's rent depends where you are, how old the property is, how many units is the property, how long has the tenant lived there. There are no simple rules anymore about how much you can increase someone's rent. For example, did you know that at any property that's over 15 years old, rental property, 2 or more units over 15 years old is under California rent control? And there's a limit about how much you can increase the rent. Does anyone know what the limit is in the Central Valley about how much you can increase the rent? 9.2%. It changes every August. It's always 5% plus inflation, and the inflation, they said, for this area last year was 4.2, so it's 9.2. I mean, it used to be a simple question, it's not. And the other question used to be evicting someone. You used to be able to evict someone for any reason you wanted. Now, if the property's 15 years old or older, and it, 2 or more units, you can only evict people for certain reasons. One of them is you want to move in yourself. One of them is you want to take it off the rental market. One of them is you want to do substantial remodel. What if I just want to sell the house? Well, thankfully, single-family homes are exempt from this. For now. It's being pushed to try to make that not exempt. I live in Los Angeles County. In LA County, single-family homes are not exempt. You cannot evict a tenant out of a single-family house in LA just because you want to sell the house. You got to wait till you sell it, and then the buyer has to kick them out. I'm just saying, it's hard to keep up with this stuff. So don't be the expert when your clients start just randomly asking you questions about raising the rent or evicting. And there are all sorts of different rules about how much notice you have to give someone to evict them or to raise the rent. Depends on how much you want to raise the rent. Is it a 90-day notice? Is it a 30-day notice? Are they Section 8 tenants? It's a different rule. And there's also a different rule to evict someone who's a Section 8 tenant if they don't pay the rent. If someone's a Section 8 tenant and they don't pay the rent, of course you can evict them. But it's not 3-day pay or quit. You know what it is? 3-day to pay, 30-day to quit. How would you know that? You're not going to know that. I don't want you to remember anything I just told you other than it's complicated. Don't be the expert advice. I mean, if you have questions, call the hotline. We'll walk you through it. We'll figure out where you are, what city you're in, what county you're in, how old is the property, how long have they been living there. And by the way, all these rules I just said that protect tenants only apply if they've been there 12 months. You know what some people are starting to do now? 11-month lease. Because then, after 11 months, you decide, do I like this tenant or not? And if you don't like them, you get rid of them. You don't need a reason. You don't need a reason unless they've been there 12 months. And if you do a 12-month lease, you can't kick them out for the 12 months. And then when the lease is over, they've been there 12 months, so you can't kick them out. Because remember, once a tenant's been there 12 months, they're your tenant for life. If the property is more than 15 years old, 2 or more units, and it's not a single family home, okay? Complicated stuff, I just wanted to know that. One other thing real quick on that to remember is single family homes are exempt from all this if you give your client a form called the RCJC, the Rent Cap Just Cause Addendum, that explains to them that since it's a single family home, you, the landlord, are exempt from all this. But you're not exempt from all this unless you give them that form, RCJC Rent Cap Just Cause Addendum. Some of you may be landlords yourself. Call us. If your clients, tell them to get their notes. Okay, that's one big picture thing. Another big picture thing you probably hear a lot about is buyer brokerage. There are these big lawsuits that are going on nationwide. The argument of the plaintiffs is that the whole commission structure we have in this country is wrong. How does commissions work now? Seller pays listing agent, typically. Listing agent shares, cooperates through the MLS with the buyer's agent. These lawsuits are trying to upend that whole system. They're trying to say, no, that's wrong. That violates the antitrust laws. Sellers should pay listing agents and buyers should pay buyer's agents. They're trying to say every single buyer has to have a buyer-broker contract and they should be the one paying their own agent. These will probably go to trial. It looks like maybe next year at some point. Whoever loses, it'll be appealed. This will drag on. Hopefully I'll be retired when it's all over. But anyway, the point is, and there's nothing you can do about it at this point. The only thing I start telling people in the mind, obviously it'll affect MLSs, it'll affect everybody if it happens, and it may never happen. Maybe just one thing in the back of your mind when you're representing a buyer, start thinking to yourself, you're used to a listing presentation. You know how to convince a seller to hire you and pay you money, but you're not normally used to doing that for buyers. You don't normally sit down and talk to them about how much you're going to get paid in this deal, and the fact that they're paying you indirectly anyway. But imagine if every deal would require a buyer-broker contract. You'd have to sit down with your buyer and convince them that you're worth however much money you're trying to get them to pay you. But you are worth it, for sure. And right now you don't have to do anything. Nothing has changed. Nothing may ever change. But it could be a big change in the next couple of years. We'll keep you posted. Nothing to do now except maybe have that mindset of being able to justify your value to a buyer if you're a buyer's agent. CAR is ready for this. We have a buyer-broker contract if you want to use it. I recommend a buyer-broker contract anyway. Because even if a buyer signs a buyer-broker contract, usually they don't have to pay you anyway, right? So you sign a buyer-broker contract, buyer says, I'm going to pay you 2.5% if you help me buy a house. Then you help them buy a house, but the listing agent through the MLS is already offering them 2.5%, 3%. So even though they've signed a buyer-broker contract, they don't have to come out of pocket because you're getting paid anyway through the MLS offer of compensation. So it's not a bad idea to get a buyer-broker contract now. It does perhaps inspire a little bit of loyalty. Plus, I have to tell you, it helps you in a procuring cause situation. Have you ever heard about a case where you have a buyer, you work real hard finding the perfect property, and then they write it up with their brother-in-law who just got his license yesterday? And you think, that's wrong. I'm the procuring cause. I brought this deal together. I'm the one who should get paid that commission. And you're probably right, and you have the right to take the brother-in-law to arbitration. But they've just changed the procuring cause guidelines to say if there are two realtors in a dispute over who should get the buyer's commission, if one of them has a buyer-broker contract with the buyer and the other one doesn't, the one that does has an advantage. They're not definitely going to win, but they have an advantage. So it's not a bad idea to, even today, start thinking about getting your buyer to sign a buyer-broker contract. You can even get a buyer to sign a buyer-broker contract where the compensation is like $1. Why would a buyer hesitate to sign that, right? Because they're not even committing to you financially. They're just committing to you, but if they don't do it, there's nothing you can do about it. But that would protect you if you're ever in a procuring cause dispute over the buyer's agent's commission. Something to think about, okay? If you have questions on this, I'll leave time at the end for sure. One other thing related to this is, have you noticed on the, speaking of form changes, there's a change on the purchase contract, paragraph 3G3, where the buyer can check a box and says, I want the seller to pay the money I owe my agent. And a lot of you look at that and say, what is that? Well, that's in the rare case where a buyer does have let's say a buyer has a buyer-broker contract, and the buyer has promised to pay them, let's say, 2.5%. And they write an offer on an MLS listing with the listing agents only offering them 2. So buyer-broker contract says, buyer will pay you 2.5, MLS says you get 2. That means the buyer owes you 0.5%. Well, did you know there's a way on the purchase contract now to check a box and say, seller, I want you to pay that? I mean, this is rare, right? Because most of you, I'm sure, don't use buyer-broker contracts. And even if you do, it's rare that the buyer is actually going to owe you money. But if that is the case, you can actually ask the seller to pay for it by checking a box and say, seller, you're basically saying to the seller, hey, seller, your listing agent is so cheap, they didn't offer my agent enough money. So I actually have to pay my agent some money. I don't want to pay money, you pay my agent. I mean, you can ask the seller to pay for anything, right? Seller, I want you to pay for my kid's college education. Seller can say no. They can say no to this. But I think what's really happening is the forms committee is prepared if that worst case scenario happens that I just mentioned. Imagine if 2 or 3 years from now the rules change and buyers have to pay their agent out of pocket. So the buyer's going to say, I don't have enough money to do that. So they're going to check that box in the purchase contract, say, seller, you pay. Well, what is it right now? Right now, the seller typically agrees to pay the listing agent, what, 5 or 6%, and they agree to share, say, 2 or 3% with the buyer's agent. Well, imagine if this happens. Well, sellers are going to say to you, I'm not signing a 6% listing. You don't have to pay the buyer's agent anymore, so I'm just going to pay you, whatever, 2.5%, 3%. And then the buyer's agent is going to say to the buyer, you need to sign this buyer-broker contract, pay me. The buyer says, I can't afford it. So you're going to check that box in the purchase contract 3G3 saying, hey, seller, you need to pay my agent's commission. And the sellers will probably say, okay. And we'll be back to where we were before. The seller's still going to pay the whatever commission it is. And, you know, that's my prediction, if this even happens at all. Okay? All right, third big thing before I start talking about little things is the Department of Real Estate. What are they up to? What are they looking for? It's always good to know what they're focusing on. A couple things you should know is that they're focusing on, I mean, this is a good company. This company is well managed. They focus on companies that don't have good brokerage, good management. So that's not something you guys got to worry about. A couple of things that they're looking on that affect everybody would be, you know, when you deal with a client, you have an obligation to help them with the forms, like the disclosure. You've got to spend some time with them explaining the forms. You know what a problem we see sometimes? Agents send a form to a client, and 5 minutes later, the client signs it and sends it back. That looks like you didn't spend any time talking to them about the form. You see what I'm saying? Be careful with your electronic timestamps. Because they come back later and say, my agent never explained the form to me. See, they sent it to me at 10:17, they made me sign it at 10:19. Maybe you did spend time with them, but the electronic record looks like you just sent them the form and demanded that they sign and return it. So maybe just work it into your procedures that you can demonstrate that you did spend some time with your client explaining the things that you're asking them to sign. because that is part of your job to do that. Okay, so this is something we're seeing a little bit. Another thing we're seeing, the other thing from the DRE we're seeing, excuse me, is fair housing and open houses. You know you can't discriminate against anybody in California, pretty much. So if someone shows up at your open house, or they show up at a showing and they have a little dog with them, and the seller says, no dogs on my property. Don't allow them in the open house. You can't show, I don't want any dogs coming into my property. Do you have the right to tell someone they can't bring a dog into the property? It depends on what kind of dog it is. If it's a regular dog, of course you can say no, but if it's a service animal or an emotional support animal, you gotta let them in. Okay, enough on the big picture stuff. Rentals, you got the message. Don't give advice. Buyer brokerage, nothing may change, but the forms are there if you need them. And the DRE, a couple things that they're interested in. Let's get into some more specifics. Let's talk about some laws. Let's talk about some forms. Are there any new laws that are really a big deal that you should know about? Just a couple so far that aren't that big of a deal, but you should know about. One of them deals with flippers. I'm not talking about porpoises. I'm talking about people who buy a house and resell it quickly. There's a new law. It doesn't take effect until next July that says, normally when you sell a house, do you have to disclose renovations that you made to the house? No. You have to disclose if you had a major problem. Oh, we had a major plumbing leak, flood, and we fixed it. Yeah, you got to disclose if you had a plumbing problem. But if you just randomly did some renovations on the property that you're selling, in other words, you weren't correcting a problem, you're just adding a bedroom or whatever, you don't have to disclose that. A lot of you like to disclose it, but you don't have to. New law says if the person selling the property is selling it within 18 months of when they bought it. So they closed escrow, and now they've accepted an offer within 18 months of buying it. They're a flipper. They now have to disclose, starting next July, they have to disclose to the buyer all work that they did on the property during the last 18 months. In other words, the flipper work they did. They have to disclose. Is there a form for this? No. Where am I going to disclose it? You're just going to disclose it on the TDS or the SPQ. There's no particular place you're going to disclose it. But it has to be disclosed starting next July by sellers who are selling it within 18 months of buying. Okay, so it's a new disclosure, no form for this, just all renovations. All renovations, no, everything that required a contractor or should have used a contractor because it was over $500. Okay? And if the seller is in possession of any permit, they have to provide it. And if they don't have the permit, they have to give the name of the contractor and the contact information of the contractor. Okay? Not that big of a deal. One more brand new law that's going to take effect January 1st deals with natural hazard disclosure reports. Do you guys, I know you're a lot of areas here, do you guys deal with fire zones, right? You deal with the fire hardening defensible space form. Isn't that annoying? It's hard to figure that form out. Remember, every house in California, right, is either in a state fire responsibility area or a local fire responsibility. What does that mean? If you're in a local fire area, you have a fire, you call up 911, the local fire company is going to come out. If you're in a state area and you have a fire, you're going to call 911 and CAL FIRE is going to come out. State responsibility, local. Also, whether you're in state or local, properties in California are divided into very high fire hazard severity zone, high fire hazard severity zone, moderate or nothing. You know, right? If your listing is in high or very high, as opposed to moderate or nothing, you have to give the buyer the fire hardening defensible space form, right? Okay. So I'm a listing agent. How do I know if my property is in a high or very high fire hazard severity zone? Well, I look at my NHD report. And my NHD report has two boxes on it. One of them says very high fire zone. One of them says wildland area. If neither box is checked, you're not in a fire zone. Don't worry about it. If the very high fire hazard box is checked, you know you're in a very high fire zone. You've got to provide the form. But what if that box is not checked, but the wildland area box is checked? What is that telling you? That's telling you you're in a state responsibility area and you're either in a high or a moderate fire hazard zone. You sync up, I need to know which one. Because if I'm in a high one, I have to provide this form to the buyer. If I'm in a moderate, I don't. How do I know which one it is? Well, today you have three choices. You can actually look at these maps yourself. You can call the fire marshal, or you can ask your NHD rep. And hopefully they know and they can help you. I have good news for you. Starting January 1st, because of a new law, you're not going to have to talk to anybody. Because I know you don't like talking to these people. The NHD report is going to have a simple yes or no box. If you're in a very high or high fire hazard zone, whether it's in a local area or a state area, it's going to check yes. If you're not, it's going to be no. So without doing anything else, by just looking at the yes or no box, you are going to know whether the fire hardening or defensible space form is required. It's not that big of a deal, but it's something. Okay? By the way, you have a listing, it's in a high fire zone. Is the seller required to do a defensible space inspection before they sell the house? No, unless you live in Butte County. Or if you live in Truckee. Do you guys deal in those areas? Probably not, right? In other words, none of your listings require the seller to do a defensible space inspection. Why am I saying this? Because we run into fire officials across the state saying, oh, there's a law, you can't sell your house here unless you call us up and have us do a defensible space inspection. If they're in Butte County or if they're in Truckee or Paradise, that's true. If they're anywhere else, it's not true. So don't let them tell you that, okay? Doesn't seem to be a problem with you, you're not running into that. Some fire marshals will go, that has become a big issue. Okay, let's talk about some other laws before I talk about some other forms. We're talking about ADUs. And remember, California does encourage ADUs. They want you to build ADUs. Basically, to build an ADU, all you need is what's called ministerial approval. The local government or the HOA doesn't have the right to say, no, we don't want you to build this ADU. As long as you get a building permit, as long as it's no bigger than 800 square feet, you can build it. They can't stop you. Well, a couple of changes to that is they've been dragging their feet, giving the approval. The new law says they got 60 days to approve it. After that, just do it, whether they've approved it or not. Also, you can build them taller than you used to. It used to be limited to 16 feet high. Now they can be 18 feet or 20 feet or sometimes 25 feet. But still 800 square feet, so they're going to be thinner. But taller. But you can build them, and we've run into problems around it. Can they require you to build add parking for the ADU? Not if the property is within half a mile walking distance from a major thoroughfare, like a street. Okay, we've run into cities and HOAs who are ignoring this and denying people the right to build. We have a solution if that ever happens to you or one of your clients. You call us up, tell us, we've hired a couple of attorneys. We have sort of an in-house law firm now at CAR whose only job is suing the government. They sue cities, and it's not just ADUs. Maybe you're having a dispute with the city of Modesto, the city of Stockton, whatever. You're trying to build a driveway, you're trying to do an addition, you're trying to do something, and they're not letting you do it. But when they don't let you do something, sometimes they don't have the right to not let you do it. They're just not letting you do it, for the heck of it. Call us up, we analyze the situation. If you have a case, we turn it over to our in-house attorneys who sue cities. And unlike the hotline attorneys like me, these are mean attorneys. So they're scary and they always win. It doesn't cost you or your client anything. They just sue this. Usually a threat to the city is enough, but sometimes we have to sue. So we have attorneys on staff for free to help you and your clients deal with cities and HOAs that are not following the law. Okay? I mean, sometimes they do have the right to stop you from doing things, but not always, and they sometimes don't let you do it. By the way, have you ever noticed these? You ever seen one of these prefab accessory dwelling units where they come and just plop it down, you know, like a mobile home or something? Realtor asked me the other day, can I have a relationship with these company that builds these prefab ADUs so I can go to people, my clients, and say, hey, here's a good company that will, you know, give you an ADU so I can get paid a referral fee. Can you get paid referral fees from the ADU company? Not unless you have a mobile home dealer license. Okay? Otherwise, if you do though, you can. That's a new business for you. Just gave you a new business. Get a mobile home dealer license. Check with management if it's okay to do that, but theoretically you can do it. Speaking of HOAs, can an HOA stop you from renting out your property? Well, they have to allow at least 25% of the property owners within the HOA to rent it out. But if you're only going to rent out a portion of your property, they can't stop you at all. So if you're only renting out the garage, or you're only renting out one room, HOA can't stop you. There's no 25% rule. Or let's say you got an ADU on the property. It's part of an HOA, you have an ADU, and you want to rent out the ADU. Well, you can do it because you're only renting out part of your property. You're not renting out the whole property, you're only renting out the ADU. Or you can live in the ADU and rent out the main house. HOA can't stop you. The only limitation is they can prohibit short-term rentals, right? They can stop you from Airbnb or anything less than 30 days. By the way, do any of you guys work near the ocean? You guys work more central? Fortunately not. The reason he said that is because everything I just said in the last half hour is completely superseded by the Coastal Commission. They can stop you from doing anything. But if you don't have to deal with the Coastal Commission, you can take for granted everything I just said. Okay? So that's the latest on HOAs. That's the latest on HOAs. Tax things. Did you know there's a law that says if you sell your house for a particular profit, you may actually owe capital gains tax? Have you heard that? When this law was passed many, many years ago, hardly anybody, the average sale price was like $200,000, nobody had to pay capital gains tax when they sell a house, because if you're single, the first $250,000 worth of profit is tax-free. If you're married, $500,000. But as prices have gone up over the years, it actually happens now, where sometimes a seller, a married couple, will sell a house for $500,000 more than what they paid for it. And guess what? They owe capital gains tax. So I have two bits of information for you. Number one is there was a recent case where this happened, and they came back and sued the realtor and said, "You never told me that was going to happen." And the realtor said, "I don't have to give you tax advice." The judge disagreed. Now, that's not an appeal. I think we're going to win. But number one, we've changed, of course, the statewide buyer and seller advisory. I hope that's a form you give to your clients, the SBSA, that big long 15-page form. There's now a new paragraph that advises the clients, you may have a capital gains consequence when you sell your house. The second bit of good news is NAR is pushing very hard on the national level to get the law changed to double the exemption. So hopefully it'll pass and it'll say if you're married, the first $1 million worth of profit will be capital gains tax-free, and the first, if you're single, $500,000. So I think it's got a pretty good chance of passing. We'll keep it posted. The only thing I really want you to take away from what I just said is if you're not already using the SBSA, I would advise giving that to your clients, okay? Remember that form? Remember it started off about 10 pages and now it's like 15 pages? Remember that? What happened? every time a realtor loses a lawsuit, we add a paragraph. Because, oops, I guess realtors have to do that one, so we better add a paragraph. Okay, so anyway, that's the way it goes. Okay, what else is going on out there? Speaking of taxes, remember to advise your clients on Proposition 19. We still find out people haven't heard about that. I mean, as Mike was saying, this is a supply problem. One of the reasons that sellers don't want to sell, not only are they sitting on a 3% mortgage, they're sitting on very low property taxes because they bought the house 40 years ago for $75,000. Now it's worth $500,000, but they're paying property taxes as if it was $75,000. So they realize if they sell today, buy another one, the property taxes are going to be like 6 or 7 times higher than they were, unless they're over 55, right? If you're over 55, you can transfer your property tax that you've been paying forever to the new property. It won't go up at all. Even if the new property costs more than the old property. And you can do this 3 times in your life. And you can go to any county in the state and do this. I'm just telling you, if you have any, when you're marketing and trying to get sellers to sell and they want to sell but they're worried about property taxes, find out how old they are. So you look kind of old, don't you? I don't say it like that, but by the way, if it's a married couple, only one has to be 55. You got your clients with the young trophy wife? They're good to go. Or the trophy husband. You don't have, and remember, you can buy the replacement before you sell the original, or sell the original, but you got a 2-year gap to do it, and you can do the first leg when you're 53. Right? You just have to be 55 into the second leg. So keep that in mind. But remember, it's not automatic. So if I'm over 55 as I am and I bought this house, they're going to tax me at the purchase price unless I go to the assessor's office and fill out a form telling them, hey, I'm over 55, I want you to transfer the property tax from my old property to the new property. It's not automatic, but you can do it. Okay? So take advantage of Prop 19. I mean, it's there for you to do it. By the way, what do you got? You can, but you're not going to, well, it depends on what you mean as far as, let me interrupt you. The previous law said you could do this once. So if you already did it once before the law changed, you can't go back and undo that one. But you can do it more now. And if you just never took advantage of it in the past, yeah, you can within 2 years. Within 2 years you can do it. Yeah.
So then if we sold the property the last 18 months and they took advantage of this, is this a conversation we can have with them now?
Great conversation to have with them, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So my question was, you mentioned, even if it's for you, I thought it was a question I'm asking, is it for investor?
It's a great question. Let's say I bought a house 40 years ago for $50,000. It's worth $500,000. I sell it for $500,000. Buy another one for actually up to $550,000. It will not go up at all. But let's say I sell it, bought it for $50,000. Now sell it for $500,000. Buy another one for $600,000. Your property taxes will go up, but only a little. They'll only go up the difference between the $600,000 and the $500,000. So you're right. With the old law, you couldn't have done it at all. But even if it costs more than the new property, you can now at least, you get a benefit. You get quite a benefit. Can it be done? No, it's only for your primary residence. Interesting, this is the one thing that triggers all the questions. Let's hold off. Let me do all the questions in a little while, but let me talk about some more stuff. By the way, what if you have a married couple and they're both 55, but sadly they're getting divorced? So they want to obviously sell the house they bought together a long time ago and each buy a new one. Can they each transfer the property tax from the low that they've been paying on this marital property to a new one? No. Only one of them gets it. Which one gets it? The one who buys first. Here's a tip. If you know any couples who aren't getting along so good, approach the one you like best. Say, number one, I advise you to get divorced. Number two, I advise you to start looking with me for a house so that the day the divorce is final, we buy the other house, you get the property tax benefit. Obviously, a good divorce lawyer will anticipate this and factor it in, but just something to think about. Okay, let's talk about forms. All right, so good news is there's not a lot of new forms. Do you want a lot of new forms? No. Do you want any new forms? No. Would you like to get rid of some of the ones we got? Of course. Sorry about that. It's not happening. Okay. So I'm going to tell you all the forms that happened this year. And there's not a lot. None of them are a really big deal. One of them is, earlier this year, in case you didn't notice, there's a new disclosure form. It's called the Solar Advisory. It's right on the purchase contract, paragraph 11M. Form SOLAR, solar. If you have a listing and the property has any type of solar energy, solar in any way, you have to fill out this form and give it to the buyer. That's wonderful. Second, that's pretty much the only real mandatory new form. There's also a form, I don't know, with the shortage of property, with the shortage of inventory, do you ever have buyers in these competitive situations to make their offer more competitive? They remove their contingencies in their offer. So they write a non-contingent offer, right? Well, of course, buyers do this, and they get the house, and they move in, they find problems, say, well, I wish I'd had contingencies so I could have inspected it. It's my realtor's fault. She made me do that. She forced me to make I didn't want to do a non-contingent offer. She made me do it. Her fault. So we got a new form. Non-contingent offer advisory. If you're ever representing a buyer and they want to make a non-contingent offer, give them the form which explains to them, I, the realtor, am not advising you to do this. It's not my idea. In fact, I think it's a very risky thing to do, but if you want to do it, you do it. I am not the one telling you to do it. Just like we always add a paragraph to the SBSA, when realtors get sued and lose, we add new forms too. It's just the way it goes. Okay, so that's 2 brand new forms. A third brand new form deals with the issue of delivery of documents. So, some of us, me, remember real estate before email. Can you believe that? Most of you people are like, there was actually life before email? Yes, there was. If there was no email, how did you deliver documents to the other side? Get this, you got in your car. Drove to the office of the other realtor. Tracked them down, came to their desk, put it in front of them, say, please sign this, and print hard so the carbon paper comes, copies of the carbon paper come through. Okay, email happened about 35 years ago. Nobody delivers documents in person. We always email documents. What's the problem with sending a document by email? The other side says, I never got it. I don't know what you're talking about. You missed the deadline. I never got your form. Which is why, for the last 30 years, we've been telling you, when you email a document to the other side, make them respond. Make them respond and say, yes, I got it. Otherwise, they could always say, I don't know what you're talking about. All right. We made a change to the purchase contract in the fine print that now says, if one agent gives the other agent an email address, and you send a document to that email address, you don't have to prove that they got it. You just have to prove that you sent it. Which makes sense, right? People can't play the game, oh, I never got your email. Well, I sent it where you told me to send it, so you got it. Now it actually says on the form, everyone agrees that if you send it to the email on the form, it is legally delivered. However, if you've noticed the fine print on the last page of the contract, for this to work, the agent has to check a box under their email address confirming that, yes, this email address that's on my contract, this is the one I want you to send documents to. What if the agent doesn't check that box? Well, then you're back to where you were before. They get denied it. They got it. So what do you do if you get a contract back from the other side, or you get an offer and they didn't check the box? We have a form to harass them. It's called the DEDA, Designated Electronic Delivery Address Addendum. You're basically sending it to the other agent saying, hey, I think you forgot to check the box there. I really need to know where you want to send me this stuff, so there's no confusion later. If I send you a contingency removal, if I send you a notice to perform, I don't want any argument that I didn't send it to the right place. Of course, what if you send them that form and they still don't do it? That's giving you a heads up that they're the sneaky type of agent who's going to pretend they didn't get your emails. So you're going to have to follow up with your emails. Question?
In that case, because he said they didn't put it on the original offer, he did not offer.
You could do it on a counteroffer, right? You don't have to use this DEDA form. Exactly right. You can definitely use a counteroffer to do it. Okay. A couple more brand new forms you should know about. Have you ever sold a house or sold a property that's part residential, part commercial, mixed use? Question is, what purchase contract do I use to do that? Do I do the residential contract or do I use the commercial contract? All these years we never had a good answer. Our answer used to be you need both. You no longer need both. We have two new addenda. One is called the Mixed Use Purchase Addendum. One is called the Residential Units Purchase Addendum. So let's say you got a property that's primarily residential. It's just got a little commercial piece. Use the residential purchase contract and the mixed use purchase addendum to cover the the commercial part. Alternatively, let's say you got a property that's predominantly commercial or land. It's a big piece of land or it's a big commercial. It's got a little residence on the side. What form would I use to write an offer? Use the commercial form or the vacant land form and add to it this new form called the Residential Units Purchase Addendum. So we have a couple of addendas for mixed use property. Okay. Any more forms you should know about? Not just a couple of things, not a big deal. You know the contingency removal form, CR? It's been split into the buyer contingency removal and the seller contingency removal. Why is that? Well, you know, most of the time your buyers have the contingencies, right? The buyers have 8 contingencies. My offer is contingent on getting a loan, appraisal, inspections, disclosures, CC&Rs, HOA docs, blah, blah, blah. Typically, the seller doesn't have any contingencies. Although sometimes they'll counter you and say, I'm accepting your offer contingent on me finding a replacement property, something like that. The problem is, all these years there's just been one contingency removal form to be used by buyers and sellers. So there's a place for a buyer signature and a seller signature. 99% of the time, the person removing the contingency is the buyer. People get confused, though, by that seller signature thing. Oh, you got to get the seller signed. Oh, I don't have to sign. I'm not removing the contingency. Remember, there's a place for you to sign. Well, now that there's a separate buyer contingency removal form, BCR, you're going to use that to remove buyer contingencies, and there's no place for the seller to sign, so there's no confusion about getting that signature. On the rare cases where there is a seller contingency, you're going to use the seller contingency removal form where there is a place to sign. Okay? Once again, I don't think that's a big deal. 2 more I want to mention. Back to rentals that I know you don't really do, but just you should know this. For years we've had a pet addendum because some landlords allow pets, but they have rules for the pet. But you know, now we have all these service dogs and emotional support animals. So we have a new form called the Animal Terms and Conditions Addendum, because sometimes it's not a pet, it's an animal, but you can still have rules for the emotional support animal. But there's a form for that. By the way, you're a landlord, the tenant has a dog. Your tenant's dog bites one of the other tenants. Can the person who gets bit sue the landlord? Well, not for just one bite. it's called the one free bite rule. And I'm saying this seriously. In other words, as a landlord, you didn't know that your tenant's dog has a tendency to bite people. But once they bite someone once, you now know this. You have an obligation now to protect your other tenants. So you got to say to that tenant, either get a new dog or don't let the dog outside, but you got to do something. And then you actually have the right to require the tenant to get rid of that dog. Make sure you put that in the pet addendum or the animal addendum now, because if that dog bites another person, or they bite the same person again, you, the landlord, were on notice from the first bite that you had a vicious dog on the premises. So if the person who gets bit the second time can sue not only the tenant with the dog, they can sue the landlord for allowing this vicious dog to be running around on the property. So one free bite, remember that, okay? But that even applies to emotional support dogs. Just because it's an emotional support dog doesn't mean it's allowed to go biting people. So you can say to the tenant, okay, you're entitled to an emotional support dog, not that one. Get a different one, or leave, or move. It's very serious about that, so keep that in the back of your mind. Okay, last new forms are getting back to rentals that you don't do, but just keep in mind, you know when you sell a house, there are all these disclosures you have to give the buyer. We got the TDS, we got the NHD, we got the SPQ. What about when you lease a house or you lease a unit? Are there any disclosures the landlord has to give to the tenant? Yes. You have to disclose bed bug issues, termite issues. Did anyone die on the property in the last 3 years? Is the property older than 78 and it might have lead-based paint? Was this property ever a meth lab? There's a series of disclosures landlords have to give to the tenant. Where do they make these disclosures? Well, up until now, these disclosures were on the lease form. They've now been moved from the lease form to a separate disclosure form. So we finally have a tenant TDS. It's called the RPOD, Rental Property Owner Disclosure. Don't worry, it's going to be attached to the lease form. So if any of you guys are landlords and you already use the CAR lease form, no problem, you're going to give all the disclosures on the attached RPOD. This is also good for those of you who don't use the CAR lease form. The other form you're using may not have all the proper disclosures. Now we have a disclosure form you can use. So there's now what I call the tenant TDS RPOD, Rental Property Owner Disclosure. Think of it as a mandatory form when you're leasing residential property. Okay? That is it for all the new forms that came out this year. But let me finish up by talking about some of the changes to the forms we've already got. First of all, have there been any changes to the purchase contract? Well, I already mentioned there's a solar advisory. There's a section on the last page that talks about the email address. You have to check a box saying this is the email address I want you to send stuff to. That's a couple new forms. That's a couple changes. A couple more things are interesting. We finally have a definition of legal holidays. You've noticed on the purchase contract, if you have a deadline, I got 45 days to close, I got 17 days to remove contingencies, I got 3 days to do this, whatever deadline it is, it says in the purchase contract, if the deadline falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, it's not the deadline. Deadlines cannot end on a weekend or a legal holiday. By the way, there's only one deadline that can occur on a weekend, and that's the move-out day. You can agree that the seller has to move out on a particular weekend day. Other than that, deadlines cannot end on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday. Well, the question is, what's a legal holiday? Is Halloween a legal holiday? Sadly, no. Is Cinco de Mayo a legal holiday? No. St. Patrick's Day? No. All the good ones are not legal holidays. But You'd be surprised, there are some days that are legal holidays you probably didn't know. Juneteenth. First day of the Lunar New Year. Indigenous Persons Day. So how am I supposed to remember which are the legal holidays and which ones aren't? Well, finally it now says in the purchase contract, the legal holidays are the legal holidays listed in California Government Code 6700. I know what you're thinking. Just list them in the contract. Don't make me go Googling Government Code 6700. Well, they keep changing them every year, so the Forms Committee said, we're just going to make you Google. So you have a calendar and you notice a deadline is falling on a holiday you never heard of before, it might be a legal holiday. Call the hotline or Google Government Code 6700. It lists them all. Okay? All right. Another interesting thing on the purchase contract you should know about is, okay, every contract you know has a closing date. You know that. That's paragraph, the very first page, paragraph 3C. But also every contract has a move-in date. The move-in date is not necessarily the closing date. Maybe you let the seller rent back for a few days. Who knows? So on the second page of the contract, paragraph 3M, it talks about moving. And what it says is, there are two types of properties. One is it's seller occupied. And the other is occupied by other people. So if it's seller occupied, it says the presumption is the move-out day is the closing day unless you check the box and say seller's going to rent back. If they're going to rent back for up to a month, you attach this SIP form, seller in possession. If they're going to rent back for more than a month, you attach the residential lease after sale. By the way, before I hate to go off on a tangent, do you know if the seller's renting back for a week, and during that week that they're renting back, the dishwasher breaks, or there's a leak or something, did you know the seller has to fix it? Even though they're now a tenant, they're not a normal tenant, a rent-back seller is responsible for the property, even though they don't own it anymore. Not for big things like floods and fires and earthquakes, but for basic maintenance items. But anyway, let's get back to what I was saying. Okay, so you're buying a house, you want to know if it's seller occupied, you indicate when they're going to leave. But then below that, there's another box that says, if there are people in the house that are not the seller, when do they have to leave? So if I'm buying a tenant-occupied property, when do the tenants have to leave? Did you know it doesn't say in the contract? What does it say? It says attach a form called the TOPA. Tenant Occupied Purchase Addendum. That form says when the tenants have to leave. Okay, so buyers, hopefully you'll do that. What if the buyer doesn't attach it? Well, the seller should counter it and say, well, you forgot to attach this form. I'm going to counter and tell you the tenants are going to be out, blah, blah, blah. But there's been a problem. There's sometimes people living on the property who aren't tenants, but they aren't the sellers either. We call them adult children. I can speak from personal experience of the 35-year-old kid who's still in the house. Or they come back. They go home and then they come back. So you're selling the property. Buyer has no idea that this person is there. By the way, when you sell a house, you have to take your minor children with you. You cannot accidentally leave your minor children behind. But if you have a child that's over 18, okay, number one, they're not a tenant. They're not paying rent. Number two, they're not a minor child. And number three, they're not on the contract. They're not a seller. So you close escrow, and there's this 35-year-old person on the property saying, who the hell are you? I'm the son of the seller. Why are you here? No one told me to leave. What am I telling you? I'm telling you here this needs to be addressed in the contract. So the contract now says, seller, you have an obligation, paragraph 3M. Seller, you have an obligation to disclose in writing to the buyer all adults living in the property other than the sellers. other than the people on title. Sometimes maybe the spouse isn't on title. That's a good way to leave your spouse, right? Sell the house and don't leave. You're not on title, right? Okay. The point is, the purchase contract now says, seller, you must provide a list to the buyer of anyone living on the property who's an adult, who's not on title. Okay, and you should use the TOPA form to do this. But then I got good news for you. People are still going to forget to do this form. So I've got good news. Paragraph 7A now says, if there's no TOPA form, everyone agrees that the property will be vacant at close. Say, great, go, thanks for telling me that. I don't need that stupid TOPA form. But here's the thing. The TOPA form says, seller is saying to the buyer, these are the adults currently living on the property. I'm going to use my best efforts to get them out. So what if you use the TOPA form and close the escrow, there's somebody still there? It says on the TOPA form, buyer, you have two remedies. You can either close and deal with it yourself, or you can cancel the whole deal and get your money back. What you don't have the option to do is sue the seller. But let's say you don't fill out the TOPA form. You just rely on paragraph 7A. Well, if you do that, the seller is guaranteeing the property is going to be vacant. They're not like going to use their best efforts. They're guaranteeing it. So if you don't use the TOPA and you get ready to close and there's still an adult on the property, the buyer can sue. Whereas if you use a TOPA, the buyer can only either cancel or close. No right to sue. So the TOPA form protects the seller. Just think about it. If you're ever in the situation where there are adults on the property, and the seller has some reason, usually the seller says, of course they're going to be gone. So it's probably not a big issue, usually. Okay? One more thing, cash for keys. You ever had a tenant, you want to kick them out, you have the right to kick them out, but they're not going easily? So, oh God, I could hire a lawyer and evict them. Maybe I'll just bribe them. Is it legal to bribe a tenant? Yes. We call it cash for keys. Say, if I just give you some money, will you just leave? Can I give you cash, you give me the keys, so I don't have to evict you? Yes. But there was a recent court case that said, this is not legal unless it's the tenant's idea. It's never the tenant's idea. But don't worry, there is a solution. The solution is as long as, so you can still, as the landlord, propose this on the cash for keys form, but the thing to remember is it's got to be signed by the tenant first. It says this on the cover sheet of that form. So if you are a landlord ever in this situation and you want to bribe the tenant with the cash for keys, you'll pull up the form on Zip Form. It'll be a cover sheet for your eyes only that says, feel free to fill out the form and give it to the tenant. Make sure that you don't sign it first. Send it to it unsigned. Make the tenant sign first, so legally it looks like it was their idea. Even though you know it wasn't. By the way, we have other forms like this. You know what I just said? Remember I said before that if you give a 3-day notice to someone, if they're a Section 8 tenant, it's got to be 3 days to pay, 30 days to quit. Well, we have a cover sheet on our pay, rent, or quit form that explains this. So when you're using CAR forms, especially if you're a landlord, always look at the cover sheet. It may tell you things that you're not going to tell the tenant. They're for your eyes only. Okay? We got forms for everything. You know when I started 38 years ago, you know how many forms there were in CAR? 10. Purchase contract was 2 pages. Who remembers these days? I know Mike remembers these days. How many forms are there now in some forms? Only 250. How long is the purchase contract? Only 16 pages. I can't keep up with this stuff. How are you supposed to keep up with this stuff? This is why you have a legal hotline. Call us all day long if you want to. We will help you. With the forms especially. All right, that is it for forms. There is no other form changes. I think you'd agree, nothing too crazy this year in the forms area. Are there any other laws you should know about? Not really worth talking about. If any of you deal with mobile homes, mobile home park managers now have to be certified. They have to take a class. If any of you guys are mobile home managers, Section 8 tenants I keep talking about, no longer in California can you discriminate based on source of income. So it used to be someone would apply to your rental and they'd say, what's your source? Well, I have a subsidy, I have a Section 8 subsidy. Landlords were allowed to say, I'm sorry, I choose not to participate in the Section 8 program. Can't do that anymore. Every one of you is if you're a landlord, you're a Section 8 tenant. Do I have to take every tenant that comes in? No. You can still pick and choose. You can still choose one tenant over another based on their objective information, like their credit score, their income, whatever. But you can't just arbitrarily say, I don't take Section 8. And there's still landlords who do. They put in their ads, no Section 8. That's like putting in your ad, I'm a criminal, come and arrest me. They're admitting they're a criminal. And both the DRE and the Fair Housing Department have hired testers who are not real tenants. They'll call up landlords and property managers and say, oh, I see you have a vacancy. Do you take Section 8? And if the landlord says no, they're dead. They've just on the phone, speaking to a government employee, admitted that they violate the law. So if you ever get the phone call, do you take Section 8? The answer is, are you kidding me? I love Section 8. They're my favorites. Don't forget that. Okay. REOs, new law that says when a bank or a lender forecloses and then resells the property, we call that an REO. For the first 30 days, they can only accept offers from owner-occupiers. That's good. Plus, they cannot sell properties in bulk. REOs have to sell properties one by one. They can't say, we got 10 properties for sale, they got to buy all 10. Who could buy 10 properties at once? You know, some big investment. So that's interesting. Let's see, we've hit the big stuff. I don't think, oh, okay. A couple more things. I don't know about you, but everyone I know has been running into, heard about these so-called vacant land scams. You get a call from someone that says, I got a piece of land, I want to sell it quick, I want to hire you to sell it. Can you help me? I don't even need to sell it at fair market value, it's totally paid for, let's just sell it. Of course, they don't want to meet you in person, it's all email, they don't even want to Zoom with you. These are all red flags that that's not a real seller. They don't actually own the property. But it's happened where realtors and sellers have wire me a deposit, blah, 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 and then you send a deposit and you never see it again. Never deal with a client who won't meet with you or at least Zoom with you, and always verify who the true owner is on the property. Don't just take someone's word for it that they're actually, this happened to my son, happened to people in our office, it's happening all over the place. We have information on our website, check it out, vacant land scams, just look for the red flags. Another big issue, of course, is insurance. You know, the biggest insurer in California, the big two have left the state. They're not writing new policies. Insurance is more and more expensive. I don't have a silver bullet answer for you responding to this. CAR did a town hall on this. It's on the website if you want to look at it. I guess the key takeaway to remember, of course, is as a buyer, don't remove your inspection contingency unless you've figured out how much the insurance is going to cost you. Because sometimes buyers, once they figure that out, they can't afford the house anymore. But they've already removed their contingencies, and then the lender will impose whatever insurance the lender wants to get for you. And if you've removed your loan contingency, you've already removed your inspection contingency, you can't complain about it. Because it's part of the loan docs that you will get insurance or the lender will impose insurance on you. So you have to check out insurance before you buy the property, and that's a key thing to remember. And that's really about it. There's one new product that CIR just came out with that is going to be offered through your NHD provider. It's called a Wildfire Disclosure Report. Okay. So you know, first of all, we have this form called the Wildfire Advisory, right? I recommend you give that, if you're in any rural area at all, it's not a mandatory form, give it to your client. Number two, as I told you before, if you're in a high or very high fire zone, you have an obligation to give your client the special form, right? Fire hardened defensible space. Well, there's a brand new thing just came out a couple weeks ago that you can also do. You as an individual property owner, either the buyer or the seller, can, through your NHD company, pay approximately $140 for something called a Wildfire Disclosure Report, which is going to be a report about just this particular property. Talking about, is it in compliance with the defensible space? Are there any recommendations about fire hardening? In other words, it's going to be geared towards this particular property. It's going to be a disclosure about the fire susceptibility of this property. It's not mandatory, obviously. Buyers can buy it, sellers can buy it, buyers can ask sellers to pay for it. We're hoping that the insurance industry sort of looks kindly on this and it'll help them do information, help them decide whether, if you have a good one, it might help you to get insurance or help you get cheaper insurance. The company that is going to do this is not going to walk on the property. They're doing this based on satellite imagery and public information, their own software. But there is a new product. It's not free. It's through your NHD companies called a Wildfire Disclosure Report. Just came out a couple weeks ago. Okay? What our real hope is that these forms are going to be accurate. So let's say that the next time there's a fire, it'll be clear that properties were less susceptible to being damaged if their wildfire disclosure report gave them a pretty high score. In which case the insurance industry is going to say, hey, that's a good thing. We want you to do that, and we'll get you cheaper insurance. We'll see how it all plays out. Okay? We'll see you all next year. It's been great.